morning. My name is Fred Cole, and I'll be the worship leader for this morning's service. One thing I love about this congregation is the way, as individuals, we can come together in the common good whenever we find injustice at work here in the larger community. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder. And I want to take a moment to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining us on the internet. If you're with us online, I invite you to complete the visitors form on the link provided, because we'd love to connect with you. Some of us are bringing our best selves to this space, and some of us are bringing our struggling selves. All of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. Some of us already have open hearts, and some of us aren't quite there yet, because our hearts have gotten a little beat up this last week or month, or fill in your own blank, and might have forgotten just how to trust and be open with one another. Your heart is welcome here. No matter how bruised, we welcome you among us. All of us are imperfect, but we're here to drop our defenses and trust what life happens in worship is powerful and life-giving. Together, we affirm that on this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning. Welcome. I do have 3 announcements this morning. Today, after the service, your board will be listening, so join them if you want to hear updates about what's going on around UUCB. And this is also a time to ask questions or to share your feedback with members of our governing body. And don't forget, next Sunday is our service for the animals. We'll hold it outside, because of this carpet. So bring your pets, your livestock, or your stuffed animal, and yourself, and join us for this service. And also, after next Sunday's service, we are going to be restarting our new to UU gathering with Reverend David and our new membership coordinator, Irene Kirschenbaum. They will host this as an informal session about Unitarian Universalism in general, and about the church in particular. So if you're newish and want to learn more, or have a neighbor or friend that might like it here, plan to stop in. Good morning.
I mentioned before we've been working on training one of the cats for the service next week. It's going well, but it's also not clear any progress has been made. For all the promises we make here, we never promise that your heart will not break, that your heart could be brave, bold, bursting open, and be saved from that ache that sweeps over all of life. We can only hope to bolster the bravery and quiet the ache. Hope to be a community that might listen your story into being and becoming, whispering along the way. It's not the end, even now. The day breaks for all of us. So let us gather, friends, once again with our restlessness, our release, our risk, grieving the pain, praising the good, and giving thanks that we dare still to wade into the waters of love and longing, that we keep moving, keep laughing, keep singing and sighing and holding the silence for this time. Come, let us worship together. We rise in body or spirit. Let's begin in song together. The song sheet should be there in the pews with you.
Our flaming chalice is the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. It suggests, perhaps, that within our separate selves burns a flame of unity and connection and compassion. Once felt, that fire cannot be extinguished. And so here we gather, weaving our lives together. This morning we are talking about promises, made, broken, remade. Well, 5 years ago, almost to this same day, this congregation made one huge promise. We voted almost unanimously to become a sanctuary congregation. We said that in concert with several of our other faith communities, that we would provide a shelter, a place of safety for an immigrant person facing deportation at the hands of an unjust immigration system. Well, we kept that promise. We had no idea what we were getting into, who it would be, how long it would last. We only knew that we were committed. We knew that we were going to open our doors and in actuality close them for someone in need of our love and care. Well, there's a whole lot more to that story, but suffice it to say that in December 2017, Ingrid Encalada Latorre and her sons Bryant and Anibal came to live with us here at UUCB. And Elizabeth would join them in September of 2019. We Don't forget that either. We created Sanctuary Now for the express purpose of providing for this family and coordinating the efforts of the larger Boulder County Sanctuary Coalition, our interfaith partners, to ensure the health and the well-being of this family for as long as it would take. Well, it took 4 years. Oh, throw in 2 years of pandemic just to make things a little more interesting. And now, even though Ingrid and her family are able to live in their own space, our work is far from done. Our promises and our commitment to her family, they remain just as strong as ever. And that being said, I'd like to invite Ingrid and Diana Solares to light this morning's chalice.
Buenos días a todos. Como saben, pues yo soy Ingrid Encalada La Torre. Agradezco mucho a todos.
As many of you know, my name is Ingrid Calada La Torre. It's nice to see you all here today.
Octubre del 2021 recibí una estadía legal en los Estados Unidos, donde inmigración me otorgó mi libertad. Después de 5 años de lucha viviendo en santuario con mis hijos, que fueron siempre el motor de mí.
In October 2021, I received a stay of removal here in the United States where immigration granted me my freedom after 5 years of struggling living here in sanctuary with my children. They have always been my engine, by the way.
Abandoné mi castillo Unitarian Universal de Boulder en marzo del 2022. Fue una experiencia maravillosa para mí, ya que pude llevar a mis niños a la escuela, al parque y pues las vacaciones que siempre ellos soñaron. Y pues tener un hogar, como todos ustedes.
I left my Unitarian castle here in Boulder in March of 2022. It was a wonderful experience since I was finally able to take my kids to school, take them on vacation as we always dreamed of, and have our very own home like all of you.
Mis hijos están creciendo. Brian ya tiene sus 14 años, va a high school, y pues Aníbal va para 7 años y está en primer grado, y Elizabeth, que cumplió 3 años y está en preschool también, y ahora todo el tiempo siempre me dice, mami, todo por qué. Paciencia.
My children are growing up. Brian is now 14 years old and is in high school. Aniba will very soon turn 7 and is in elementary, and my baby girl Elizabeth is now 3 years old and is in preschool. She talks a lot and asks questions about everything.
Pues he estado trabajando en una campaña de grupos de lucha donde la comunidad inmigrante puede sacar sus licencias profesionales, comerciales y ocupacionales. Esta ley fue aprobada el 8 de septiembre del 2021.
I have done work with the Fighting Groups campaign. This group educates the immigrant community on how they can obtain professional, commercial, and occupational licenses. This law was actually approved September 8th of 2021.
Fue algo nuevo. Empecé mis clases de GD y sigo vendiendo mi artesanía peruana y trabajo de limpieza para poder sostenerme todavía en este país.
I also started my GED classes. I still continue to sell my Peruvian crafts, and I am also doing home and yard cleanups to be able to support myself and my family.
Ahora estoy apoyando a Unidos por una reforma migratoria y la paz mundial, donde estamos pidiendo al Congreso actualice la fecha de registros de inmigración.
I am now supporting and working with Unidos for an immigration reform and world peace, where we are asking Congress to support the change of date on the immigration registration bill.
Afuera estará el código donde me pueden apoyar, porque ahora es el momento de hacer cambios, donde yo me beneficio más que todo. Y estoy trabajando en mi estadía State Removal, ya que se me va a vencer.
There will be a QR code provided outside if you'd like to sign this petition. For me, it will really mean a lot for me and the community. I am also now working on a second stay of removal with my team.
Pues con mi equipo, que siempre me ha apoyado todo este tiempo, y el congresista John Negust me seguirá representando, y pues y esperemos ganar, y mi caso de nuevo, y seguir disfrutando mi libertad con mi comunidad y familia.
Congressman Joe Neguse continues to work with me alongside my team, who has always been there for me. We are hoping that we win this case once again, and I can continue to enjoy my freedom with my community and family.
Y pues también tenemos en mente un bill privado, y pues todavía estamos en espera, pero esperemos que eso me lleve algo más de la residencia o una ciudadanía con el tiempo. Y tengo fe que ganemos esta vez de nuevo.
And we continue to work on different strategies. One of those is the possibility of obtaining a private bill. This will put me on a path to be able to get a residence. And I continue to have faith and hope that it'll look better for me.
Y pues seguir todavía disfrutando con mi comunidad, y aquí van a tener a Ingrid y su familia, porque pertenecemos aquí.
And let's hope that I continue to cherish these beautiful moments with my community, and hopefully you can all keep Ingrid and her family with you here in the United States, because this is what she wants for her family.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. You know, I've been with you all for a little bit more than a year now, so I wasn't there for the beginnings of that journey, of our journey with Sanctuary. And a journey it has been and continues. I'll share a story that I heard a long time ago, far away. This is a story by Reverend Dr. Barbara Marshman, who was a Unitarian Universalist religious educator. And she was my religious education director when I was a kid. So just like Reverend Dana is now, Barbara was mine. Before she went into ministry, she was a puppeteer. She would travel around New England doing puppet shows. I don't have puppets for this story. I feel a little chagrined. But that's okay. In a land far away, because this is how stories start, in a land far away, a wise old man who knew a great deal about people, because he traveled from place to place, arrived in a strange village. I don't know why I'm gesturing towards Ben. Arrived in a strange village. In this town, all the people were carrying what seemed to be great bundles on their backs, and they couldn't look around very well. They couldn't really look up because of this burden they carried. And puzzled, the wise old man finally stopped a young fellow and said, "I'm a stranger in your land, and I'm fascinated by these bundles you carry and never seem to put down. What's their purpose?" "Oh," said the other, "well, these are our grudges." That's a lot of grudges to collect at your age. "Well, they're not all mine. I mean, most of them were passed down in my family. You see that guy over there? I have a lot of grudges about that guy, because his great-great-grandfather ran against my great-great-grandfather for mayor, and he won, surely through trickery. The wise man looked around and shook his head. Y'all look so unhappy. There's no way to get rid of this? Well, the thing is, we've forgotten how to get rid of them. At first, we were proud of our grudges. We cherished them. Tourists came to see them. We renamed the town Grudgeville. But after a few years, this became a dreary place. Nobody came, and we had forgotten how to stop holding on to these things. Well, if you really want to get rid of them, said the traveler, I know 5 magic words that will do the trick. This would be a miracle. I'm going to go get the mayor. We're going to call all the people of Grudgeville together. And off he went as fast as his grudges would let him. The mayor lost no time in calling all the people to the town square, said, good people, a wise stranger has come into town and is going to give us magic words to get rid of the grudges that we've been carrying for generations. I expect, good people of Grudgeville, a wonderful thing has happened. A wise, etc. How many of you would like to straighten up and have them disappear? Listen to the wise words. My friends, said the traveler, these are simple words that are extremely difficult to say to each other. And the trick is that you have to say them and you have to mean them. And the first 2 words are, I'm sorry, and the other 3 are, I forgive you. And there was a long pause, followed by a low grumble, until first one person and then another said, I'm sorry, and I forgive you. I'm sorry, and I forgive you. Bit by bit, quietly at first, then louder, and eventually where they actually meant it. And just like the wise man predicted, the grudges disappeared and people looked up again. Wow, those trees are a lot taller than they used to be. It's good to be out from under all of this.
We are not bound together by a creed, a specific list of things that we must all believe in exactly the same way. We're united by our shared values expressed in our 7 principles and by the commitments that we make to each other. That is what brings us together as community. So to name that commitment, will you join together in person and online as we speak our covenant aloud as one? We gather in fellowship, speak truth to each other, to reach out and touch one another, to care with each other, and to seek the truth divine. So be it. May it be so.
I invite you into a time for prayer and meditation, a time for stillness. To find a comfortable way of sitting where your body doesn't interrupt that quiet too much. And let's begin all by taking a breath together. It's a moment for quieting ourselves and listening. We're listening to that still small voice within and beyond us. For listening to where your heart is, what are you hoping over or wondering over? What's breaking your heart right now? What are you pushing away so ferociously out of the fear of facing it? What do you need help with? What are you grateful for, small or big? All of those things, that quality of attention, that quality of listening inside and beyond ourselves, that's prayer. That's meditation. In the Jewish calendar, the New Year Rosh Hashanah begins this evening. And it starts a 10-day period of self-reflection and repentance, a time to think back over the year, to recall when you didn't act as you should have and make amends to those you injured. In making that work a part of the annual cycle, Rosh Hashanah and the days that follow acknowledge the inevitability that we will hurt others, that we will fall short of who we hope to be, that amends take time and energy and attention and may look real different one amend from another. And that all of that is okay. All of that is part of what it is to be alive. All of that is work for us to do again and again, one year after the next. It doesn't make us bad or broken to say we've fallen short. And it's never the whole story of who we are and what we're about. We'll be together in silence for 7 breaths. Amen. Bring to mind those things you're grateful for and joyful about. In the quiet, remember what those are. See them in your mind's eye. And bring to mind those things for which you grieve or worry. All those anxieties that come back when you're trying to fall asleep at night. For all the joys and the sorrows on our hearts, we hold this compassionate space with love. In particular, we lift up the life of John Scull, longtime member of UUCB who passed away earlier this week. We hold in love Renee, our bookkeeper, whose mother died on Monday. And at the same time, in the midst of grief, we hold the joy and sweetness of beginning again, that Rosh Hashanah promise of sweet beginnings, even in the midst of grief. For those of us meeting in person as the music begins, I invite you to come forward and take a stone and place it into the earth here in front to symbolize your joys and cares, the weight that they have in your hand, and then the way that they take their place in a larger whole with each other, held in the hand of the earth. Please come forward as you feel moved.
Return to the home of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to what you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul.
I try sometimes different ways to explain what Unitarian Universalism is. This centuries-old tradition that resists easy condensation into one sentence. But I tried on by saying maybe that what unites us is shared values, not shared belief. That we recognize a diversity of spiritual paths and a deep unity in that travel together. In this church, there are people who pray and very much do not, and people who meditate and very much do not, and people who write and make art and practice paying attention and read mindfully, and people who have no active spiritual practice at all. It's not that we're all doing exactly the same thing. We don't say the same words. We don't perform the same aspects. We don't address the holy aspect of life in some ways. And in that diversity is our unity and strength, because whatever form our spiritual life takes, behind that diversity we believe is a unity. We're on these individual paths that we find in community, a personal road guided by wisdom of generations and the counsel of others. It's a way of moving through the world. Maybe in one sentence form, it's to grow our spirits and to serve the world in community. And it's that last part, it's the in community part that's tricky and essential. In some ways, it's a lot easier to grow your spirit and serve the world without having to deal with other people. But it's I have no one in particular in mind. I just mean that as a person. There's this line. The community part is what's tricky. But it's always been there. Even 198 years ago, the Unitarian minister Henry Ware Jr., who had the wonderful job title of Professor of Pastoral Care and Pulpit Eloquence, he wrote that the great principle on which prosperity and edification, because this is 2 centuries ago, the great principle on which the prosperity and edification of the church must depend is the principle of association, union, sympathy, and cooperation. And in that list, listen to what he's not saying. He's not saying shared theology, shared creed, identical experience. He's not saying what unites us is the exclusion of some shared key enemy. He goes on, he says, the church is in its very essence an association. Its very design and constitution is to effect the purposes of personal improvement and to extend the influence of religion by mutual counsel, aid, and cooperation. Hence, he says, the apostles emphatically called it one body and its members of each other. Even 200 years ago, the key question was, how are we to be together? And the old-fashioned word for committing to a way of being together is covenant. One author says, one academic, a covenant can be traditionally understood as promises made between two parties in service to a shared mutual loyalty. We'll break that down in a second. But biblically, that often meant that two people would make a covenant before God, or God would make a covenant with humanity. Those are old roots. But for us today, covenanting means making commitments. It means making promises to each other. But more than the making of commitments or promises, covenanting means living them out even when it is really hard to do it. Reverend Sue Phillips, a colleague, draws this distinction. She says, the covenant isn't making the promise. The covenant isn't like a wedding, like the vows at a wedding. A covenant is like the relationship that follows, living up to and into those vows, even when your partner leaves his socks on the living room floor all the time. It's easy to promise big things. It's the living that stuff that's hard. When we welcome new members, when they commit to being part of this community, and when we who might already be here commit to them, we try to explain this distinction and this messy reality. I tell them that I tell you that neither churches nor their members are perfect. And that's not what we're here in pursuit of. I tell them that if you hang around here long enough, one of two things will happen. Possibly both. And in fact, definitely both. Eventually, you may disappoint the other people around you, or they may disappoint you. Eventually, a time is going to come that someone fails to act or respond in a way that you're sure they should have. Eventually, a time's going to come when you fail to act or respond in that way. But it's not that thing that happened isn't important. It's not that break or breach, that injury or hurt didn't happen. It's not that it doesn't matter. But the most important thing is, well, what comes next? Living in covenanted community, we seek right relationship with each other. We seek to repair when there's a break. A church member told me once, it's one thing to wax and swell about the pleasures and joys of walking together, of being united. And she said, look, I do that all the time. I do wax and swell about the joy of walking together. And I mean it every time I say it. But it's another thing to think about what that means in terms of reciprocity, in terms of responsibility and even obligation. Something stronger than just sweet feelings holds us in the parade. Here at the UU Church of Boulder, years ago, we developed the Covenant of Respectful Relations. I'm curious if anyone in the room was part of that process of developing it. Yeah, there's a handful of folks who were in there. It goes like this. As a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Boulder, I covenant, meaning I promise, knowing that I may screw this up, but nonetheless committing myself to it anyways, I promise to treat others in the community with love and respect I'd like to receive. I promise to listen to others with attention and empathy, that it's as important to understand as to be understood. I covenant to speak honestly and directly with care and compassion. I promise to honor the right of others to form and hold different opinions and to speak directly with anyone with whom I have a concern. And though it doesn't say it in the text, I covenant to speak directly with anyone with whom I have a concern, no matter how sweet it is, not to talk to them and instead to talk to this person about how awful they are. A covenant to keep a focus on the present and the future rather than on the past. To keep an open mind and remain engaged in the process of seeking resolution when conflict occurs. This is a covenant of curiosity and directness, promises we make to each other about how we want to be together. And they make room for different personalities and opinions and beliefs, and they do not make room for bad behavior and treating each other awfully. It's a covenant not to be mean to each other. And I should say, in case any of you are wondering, I'm not preaching on all this today because there is some awful conflict going on. I'm preaching on this covenant because it's a good time to talk about conflict is when it's not happening. We're committed as a community not to let slow simmering resentments boil on forever. And we're committed, even though it's hard, to take responsibility because we believe that accountability is not about punishment, it's about growth. Do you know the acronym AFOG? AFOG? AFGO, AFGO? AFOG. It's another, and I have to substitute a different word for the one that begins with F. So we're going to call it another friendly opportunity for growth. No, I'm not going to say it. You know it. AFOG, another friendly opportunity for growth. Those opportunities, when they come, are not pleasant or fun or hoped for, but the way through them is to steer toward them rather than to steer away from them. It's to steer into the hard stuff, to return again, just like we sang, to return again to who we are and what we are, to return again to covenant and commitment. To be in relationship and community requires forgiveness, which means 5 difficult words, I'm sorry and I forgive you, which also means reflection and taking responsibility, repair and behavior change. It's not as simple as just, I'm sorry. That wise traveler's words where you have to say it and mean it. And the meaning it is sometimes the tricky part. But we do this as a community. We do this really well. I think back to a year ago, soon after I was arriving here, there was a question that came up, that came to the board, with some folks saying, hey, we think you did something wrong, board. We think you allotted some endowment money into the budget for a purpose that you weren't really allowed to allot it for. And even though the congregation voted to do this, we don't think you actually could bring this to the congregation to do it. We think that this was constrained. And while I don't think this is reflected in the minutes of the board meeting, AFOG, said the board. AFOG, okay, another friendly opportunity for growth. And they did their research and finally said, hey, you're right. We don't like it, but we did do this wrong. And we're sorry. And luckily, the money hadn't been spent, so this is not a place where they had to go out and chase it all back down again or something. But they said, hey, we didn't do this right. We're sorry. And so they brought it back to the congregation. If you remember the meeting last spring, we voted to rescind the move that we'd made the previous year. That is, to make it right together. And we all undid it and moved on. That process is 4 steps. It's self-reflection. Oh, there is a problem here. It's apology. I'm sorry that we caused this problem. I'm sorry that I caused this problem. It's repair, making amends. And it's behavior change. And that's the process, whether it's for a board or whether it's for you as individuals. I heard a story years ago of a guy who was an alcoholic, who had struggled for years, who joined Alcoholics Anonymous. There are lots of good ways to get sober. That's one. He joined AA and deliberately started working this program of recovery. That program, the 12 steps, are sort of a spiritual practice to move the disease into remission and keep it there. And a big part of it is making amends. The big book of AA, like the Bible, guides people in this practice of seeking forgiveness. And the idea there is that living with shame, living with guilt, living with broken relationships, being a person in the world who has caused harm that's still just floating out there, that stuff feeds disease, feeds addiction. So this guy, wanting to move through that, made his list of all the people he had hurt and started making amends. And it came time eventually to return to a store where he had shoplifted. And he came with the money to repay what he had stolen years earlier. He had been caught shoplifting before when he was active in his addiction, so he was ready to be arrested and willing to go to any lengths. It mattered more to let go, to repair, to make amends. He asked to speak to the manager, he asked to speak to her privately, and explained he'd stolen from the store. And his work was making amends as part of recovery. He came to admit it and make it right, whatever it took. And the manager said nothing for a moment, and then brought him with her to the back of the store. And this is it, he thought. This is how it happened before. The manager would take him to the back room, call the police, he would be arrested. And internally, something shifted. He said, okay. He prepared himself and followed her through the aisle and to the back door and then out, standing on the loading dock in the alley behind. And there was a moment of silence, and she moved her hand. He thought she was grabbing a cell phone to call the police, but she extended it instead. And he shook it tentatively. She said, congratulations on your sobriety. And she took his payment and sent him on his way, a free man, not just from jail, a free man from what he had been carrying with him all those years. Saying, I'm sorry like that is a scary thing. I think sometimes repentance that way feels like saying, I am an irreparably broken failure, and here is yet more evidence of that. Terry and I joke sometimes, when something goes wrong, we say, well, just remember, anything less than perfection is failure. That's a joke, incidentally. But, to try and release some of the hold that has, because that's in deep unconscious. Making amends and repentance. In Hebrew, teshuvah is usually translated as repentance, but it means to return, as if turning back to something you've strayed from, turning back, returning again to something you've looked away from. Tonight's the beginning of Rosh Hashanah in the Jewish calendar, the start of the new year, the start of 10 days of awe, 10 days of teshuvah, 10 days of reflection on the things you did that you shouldn't and the ways that you fell short of who you meant and mean to be. And all of that ends in Yom Kippur, a day of fasting and making amends, and then you start your year fresh. As a kid, growing up in a culturally Jewish household, each year in late September, we would go apple picking and eat apples dipped in honey to honor the sweet new year, this old tradition of apples and honey. And at home with my little family lighting a pair of candles, it seemed a bittersweet thing, a poignant occasion, a place to remember that we have been through good things this year and not. That we've been good people this year and sometimes not. But that it's a moment to begin again. And that beginning begins by steering into the AFOG, taking accountability, saying, I'm sorry, seeking repair, and remembering that no one piece of that means that you are broken. It just means that you're human. We're beginning again, returning, beginning in sweetness, in love, beginning grounded, willing to reflect and apologize, willing to repair and change our behavior for every AFOG that comes along. And so, as the song says, with our hopes, we raise the sails to face the wind once more, and then with our hearts chart waters never sailed before. We're beginning again. Will you rise in body and in spirit to sing it?
You might remember that back when we were lighting the chalice, I used an acronym, BCSC, which stands for Boulder County Sanctuary Coalition. And that's that group of 7 faith communities that have gotten together and to support the work of sanctuary. Barbara Mulfazy and myself are the representatives from UUCB to that council. So this is sort of a report this morning. At our meeting last week, the council took several actions affecting our future as the Boulder, as the coalition. Both our aspirations and the direction that first thing we did was we changed our name. We're now the Boulder Area Sanctuary and Immigration Coalition, BASIC. Now, beyond that's a very convenient acronym, we wanted to remove a perceived geographical barrier to what we see as the mission. And second, it was to emphasize that what we're doing goes beyond just providing sanctuary, that it also means we wish to address the wider range of immigration justice issues which surround us. They're everywhere. And another reason for changing the name, it's a precursor to applying for a 501c3 status. And we're in the process of making those applications right now, and we'll soon be reorganizing our financial structures to fit those requirements. And we believe that in the longer run, this will allow the council a wider range of a better access and a wider range of financial opportunities and resources. It does not change the basic need for a dedicated base of volunteers, and we appreciate everyone who does this work. So, this Sunday only, our entire Share of the Plate offering will be used to support the work and the ministries of the Boulder Area Sanctuary and Immigration Coalition. May we be as generous as we are. Here in the Earth Room, the ushers will now accept your gifts. For those joining us online, here's our QR code, or you can contribute via the link which is posted.
We receive this offering with gratitude. Thank you for your generosity. Just following the service, Ingrid will be at a table in the Sky Room to chat and catch up with folks, and with a wonderful display of South and Central American crafts for donation. And Barbara Mulfacey will be there also with a petition asking Congress to pass pending legislation for renewing the registry provisions of the Immigration Act of 1929. And if that sounds esoteric, she's going to give you the details. We close this service, we close this year ready to begin again, to face the past, to steer towards every AFCO that comes our way, and to begin again in sweetness. We rise in body or in spirit. We'll close in song.